So hi and welcome everybody. Welcome back to the lecture of wireless security course. So in today's lecture, we will be talking about multi-factor authentication. As we know in the previous lectures, we talked about different types of encryption methods, encryption algorithms, including RSA, including advanced encryption standard, ECC, elliptic cryptography, and many other encryption techniques. And those techniques, we said that their main purpose is to protect your data transmission, to protect your data, whether the data is in move, which is being transferred from part A to part B, from device A to device B over the network, or or whether the data is on rest, which means the data is stored on a file, on a disk, or in the cloud or somewhere. You need to make sure that the data which is on rest is secure. How do you do that? You encrypt it. How? With one of the algorithms that we talked about in the previous lecture. Now that was related to confidentiality, and we talked also about one of the key requirements is authenticity. And for achieving authentication, we can use different algorithms, different ways. And one of the emerging concepts in the security industry is something called multi-factor authentication. So what does this mean? What does this term mean, and why is it important, and how we can achieve it? So all these things, we are going to talk about them in this lecture. So starting with authentication, as we explained it before and we talked about it, authentication is the process of authenticating and verifying a certain device that he's who claim to be. For example, the user wants to authenticate the receiver usually needs to authenticate the transmitter, and the transmitter usually needs to authenticate the receiver if they want to have an authentic, verified, and legit communication between them, so that nobody can hack them or spoof them or pretend to be somebody else. Now, authentication is very critical and very significantly important in wireless networks, which is also the case with wired network. But more importantly, recently, people are heading towards using multi-factor authentication. So if I ask you this question, like, one of the ways you get permission to access certain websites is by creating an account and log into the website using username and password. So this is the way, the standard way that has been implemented on the web, on the internet. And most of these applications, you access them from where? From your mobile phone, which is connected over a wireless network. This wireless network can be the 4G, the 3G, or the Wi-Fi. So you basically on a wireless link. And you just enter your username and password, and you log in, and you get authorized, and you are on the website. So automatically the server, the admin of the website, or the website owner, assumes that if you enter with these details, then you are who you are. You are, let's say Sadiq entered his email and password, then this means that Sadiq is now on the website. Sadiq is using the services offered by the website. But what if somebody like Sadiq, he got, like, let's say he got busy, he wanted to go somewhere to buy something, and he left his mobile phone, or he left his, his PC open, and somebody else comes and he just uses, he's already logged in into the website, so he can just continue using the service, continue using the website without even without letting the admin know that the person who's using the service now is not Sadiq anymore, he's somebody else. And he can access Sadiq information, he can access all the functionalities of that website, or of that service or that application, and he can do things that Sadiq doesn't want to do, doesn't want actually to execute them or do them, but somebody else on his behalf is doing them. So this means that, I mean, this is a problem in the authentication. This is like the username and password is really problematic. I mean, I cannot just use password and username and then log into the website and I assume that I am who are. I'm always anybody who has this username and password, then this is automatically going to be the legit authentic user who's supposed to be Sadiq, for example. So what's the other problem with this? Let's say that we are not talking about the case where you leave your laptop or computer and just somebody else comes and use the service. Let's talk about the case where nowadays hackers and attackers, they have very sophisticated softwares that they can conduct brute force attack in order to guess the password. So they just know that, let's say Sadiq is using his email to log into that service. Of course, I mean, it's super easy. Even if you write this in front of somebody, he can just know that you are using this email, and then the password will be unseen, hidden. Then all what he needs to do is to just go and use those advanced software and let that software run and guess the password of that website. Then automatically he will be able to log in and enter to the account of Sadiq. That's why Google, for example, when you enter your Gmail account from a different device, it sends an email automatically to your secondary email or to your main email telling you that there is a new access, which is weird. It's not coming from the same device. Are you the one who accessed your Gmail account from that device? To make sure that you are the same person. If it's somebody else, Google has to detect this and then maybe close the account on that device or something to protect you on the to protect your authenticity on the web. So this is the second case, brute forcing attack and guessed passwords. So security breaches caused by password stored in unsecured location. Let's assume, for example, also you stored your password in certain device or on a paper you wrote it in a stick note, and somebody find it on the web or something. I mean, you might just reveal this information publicly. You know, all our passwords sometimes are stored either on a file or in some applications or programs, but we can never trust these applications or programs. Somebody might hack them. Somebody even might be able to access and reach that information. So it's very critical. So these guest password or brute force password attacks, they compel the IT industry to implement stronger password management controls so that we can hopefully protect your authenticity on the wireless network. So fear of such breaches, coupled with best practices and regulatory requirements, have driven companies to adopt multi-factor authentication procedures that require users to enter an additional form of identification beyond passwords, especially when accessing systems that hold valuable or sensitive data like your banking information, your secret messaging, your very sensitive information about you or your family life, social life, whatever. I mean, you don't want anybody to get access to those, but like what happens somebody if somebody was able to guess your password, or what would happen if somebody was able to just use some advanced softwares and crack your password and enter to your information? You will be in trouble. So that's why nowadays companies are no longer just dependent on the username and password. They want more than this. They want something that's beyond password, which is something the user possesses, like email account, smartphone, or code generating device, beside the password or PIN or passphrase that the user knows. On top of that, they can also ask you to use some information that's inherent in you, like your fingerprint, your eye, your voice recognition, your face recognition, whatever, to authenticate you. We have some of these devices that require biometric data to authenticate you to use the service. So A multi-factor authentication, and it means that a user to authenticate with a user is required to authenticate with at least two different pieces of evidence beyond the username and password that prove one's identity. In order to qualify as multi-factor authentication, these pieces of evidence must come from two of the following three categories. The first category is something that you know, which is usually code, password, PIN, or whatever. Something you have, you possess, which is the email account, the smartphone, the code generating device, or specific hardware device, and something that's biometric in you, which is different from anybody else, like something nobody can fake it, which is examples on this like fingerprint, iris scan, voice recognition, face recognition, and other types of recognition which are based on biometric data. So now let's give an example. For example, the two-factor authentication. The two-factor authentication is a special case of the multi-factor authentication. So give me an example. Where do you see this two-factor authentication? Two-factor authentication, for example, when you log in to certain websites, especially those websites like deal with financial data, especially your mobile application, and you want to access your bank account. When you enter your username and password and PIN code and whatever, it sends you what? An SMS message. Where do you receive that SMS message? In your mobile phone. So what did you use here? You used your mobile phone, which is the smartphone, to receive an SMS message, and before that you used your password. So this two ways of authenticating the users. So which means that if you pass those two things, then they will authenticate you. For example, there are some other devices, some other services, sorry, tells you to, after you log in, username and password, they send a code to your Gmail account or to your official email and tell you, please enter this the code we have sent you to the following fields so that we can verify you. So this is also another way of authenticating. And also sometimes when you call a bank and you want to change something in your account, and the bank wants to verify that you are who you claim to be. So the bank representatives just ask you and tell you what's your the second and third letter of your mother name or your father name or family name. I don't know. They ask these questions, and usually if you have provided them with some security, if you have provided when you register the service, you provided them with some answers to certain security questions that they filled and registered for you when you were filling your application. They will keep these in their record, and whenever they need, they can ask you these things over the phone to verify that you are who you are. So they can also ask you as a verification about your home address number, which building, which this, which the. They can ask you about what was the price and the cost of the last bill you have paid, or things like those to authenticate that you are the real authentic user that we want to talk to. So two-factor authentication is a term that's often used interchangeably with multi-factor authentication, and various compliance regulation use this term instead of multi-factor authentication. However, the difference between multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication is that two-factor authentication refers to the use of two authentication factors only, while multi-factor authentication refers to the use of two or more authentication factors, more than two. Usually you use biometric data, biometric information, then you use password, and you use your mobile phone, smartphone, or hardware device. So it's also important to emphasize that a second use of the same authentication factor doesn't constitute multi-factor authentication. In other words, having users provide the answer to a security question or enter a PIN once their password is validated only amounts to single-factor authentication because the user is providing two forms of the same type of authentication factor, something they know. So which means that if you, for example, you ask the user to provide password and then answer a question, we consider this one-factor authentication because all these authentication types are from the same category, which is something the user knows. To consider it two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, you should use something the user knows, something the user have, and something the user like possess, and something inherent to the user like fingerprint or biometric data. So to be true multi-factor authentication, a user must provide two or more of the different authentication factors that were just mentioned before. Something, for example, something the user knows, such as passwords, something the user possesses, such as code delivered to their smartphones and so on. So multi-factor authentication, something that the user possesses. Give me examples of that. Smartphone app. So if you noticed recently, Google, they have an app called Authenticator. So what does this mean? When do you use this? You use this for sensitive information. When you access, for example, your billing, your wallet on Google, if you want to pay for some services offered by Google, usually most of you don't pay anything for Google. You all use the services for free. Just business owner pay for Google, and they encounter this more than you, because usually you are like we are usually in the consumer side. We only take things for free, and then they make these things that they give us for free to advertise for products of other businesses, and then the owners of those businesses will pay Google for displaying these ads and targeting them to the users that might be interested in them. So smartphone app, you can check it like Verifier, even e-Dawlat, if you want to access your e-government gateway, they have also certain applications that you can install in your mobile phone so that you don't access this service by just entering username and password, but also by generating some specific codes on your mobile phone. Another example is uh, bank applications, like financial services applications. Like, for example, if you have an account, a bank account in X bank, like the Dennis Bank or Waqf Bank, the Ash Bank, whatever, they just if you don't want to receive a message to your mobile phone, then they ask you to generate a code, this temporary code, which is going to be valid for a few seconds or a few minutes. So once you enter your username and password, they ask you to generate this code, and then you enter the generated code in the new coming field. So this is coming from something you possess. It's not only something you know, because this is generated from the mobile app that you have on your phone. So another thing that you have is the email, is also something you possess. You basically, codes can be sent to the email, and you take that code and enter it. Telephone call to landline or mobile number. Sometimes they don't send SMS, they don't send a code, they just call you and verify. They talk to you and give you some messages and tell you to reply them or tell us the numbers that you have just heard. So this is something the user possesses. Through the use of a landline phone, a smartphone, email, or a special hardware device, a second factor of authentication is in most instances delivered as a special code, sometimes referred to as a token. In order to prevent codes from being saved and refused, they are typically created in a way that they can be used only once and will expire if not used within a set period of time. Just I explained it before, like I told you, the code is valid only for a few seconds. If you don't use it, then it will not be valid. The system will not accept it. And that's why this authentication process is really stronger than the password. It's complementary to the password, but it makes the system more secure. The code is usually generated via a separate authentication system or third-party authenticator service or application. So, let's now continue with example. Give you this is not example on the. I already gave you the example of what you can how you can authenticate yourself with something you possess. Now let's give you an example of something that's inherent in the user. So the special authentication code that's generated for the user can come from a variety of sources depending on the authentication method and level of security needed. Some examples of third-party services which certain companies use may be able to integrate for authentication code generation include. So now here for this, something that's inherent in the user, as I just mentioned before, you use your biometric data. You use your fingerprint, your eye, your face, your voice, whatever, and it just allows you to enter the service, to enter and use the service provided by the company by entering this information. Also, some computers and laptops and smartphones, they have this feature where you authenticate by your eye or your finger or your face or your voice sometimes. Now this is on the individual, on the personal level. But what about on the organization level? What types of services, or what should they include so that they can make these services available and authenticate the users based on their biometric information? Usually they need they need one of the following things. There is something called RAIDUS server, which generates codes for a variety of computing platforms within an organization via a special enterprise servers. There is also the RSA Secure ID, provides codes using hardware or software or on demand via smartphone, which it generates a one-time code that expires in 60 seconds, and this can be mapped to your biometric data or biometric information. So the biometric information, usually one might ask, why don't we always use this? Because this is the most authentic way. Usually companies avoid using this because it's costly to implement. And usually if there is a slight error, like if you cause any slight misrecognition of the user, you will prevent the user from accessing the service or the app or the website, which is really gonna be disaster for him. So it's very important that whatever authentication method that you implement, which is utilizing biometric information, that this method should be working 100% of the time with 0% of error. Otherwise, it will be really problematic because this is something that you cannot have any control over it. This is not something, a password that you forget and you can regenerate. This is not something that you can just ask the admin and fix it for you. This is really problematic if there is any error in recognizing your biometric data. Now, let us give you an example, or not example, give you some recent trends in some websites which give different ways of accessing the services they provide. For example, let's go to this website. So this website, when you go to this website, it asks you to log into the website so that you can start using the service, but it gives you on the right-hand side, it gives you another option. This option is to log into the website without using any username or password. How do you do that? They tell you that please download this application on your mobile phone and just use our application to read this code. Once the phone reads this code, it just authenticates you and you log into the website. So there is no need for username and password, and it's very probable. It's expected in the future that many many services on the web, and the mobile applications are going to start using this type of authentication, which is much easier for the user side, because users nowadays are complaining about the, really the huge amount of username and passwords they need to generate over the web while they are using the services. Like each and every website you need to use, it asks you to create an account. And when you create account, you have, like, you have maybe one email you are using it to access all the information, all the accounts, or different emails. Then you need to recognize these emails. And you have, usually, if you care about your security, you need to use different password for each website. Unfortunately, some of the users I noticed, and many are seeing this, that they just use one account, one password, and they use it with everything on the web. And that's extremely dangerous. And even worse than this, some of the users are using the username and password of their Gmail to many of the accounts, many of the services and application on the internet, which is even much more dangerous than anything else. Why? Because you basically give the owner of the company or the business, you give him basically your password and username of your Gmail. And this is the worst thing that can happen. The other thing, that you are using the same password and same email over all the services, and this is really hectic and really dangerous, because once a hacker knows this password, he can hack you over all these services. So the best thing to use is to, like, have different emails for different services. You classify them based on their types, and different password with each website, or for each application you use. Now, user, of course, now this will give you a better security level, but unfortunately the users will complain now because of the huge amount of passwords that I need to keep tracking of. And whenever I need to log into a website, I need to save it somewhere and look for it, and there is the threat of somebody finds that password on your in where you store your password, or I don't know, but it's problematic nowadays, the password, and it's hindering the users from accessing the service. That's why we can see many websites on the internet nowadays, they just tell you to log in with your Facebook and Google account, which is even not recommended, because you basically give them control. It's not good it's good from the user perspective, that it's easy, you just use the same thing and log in, but it's not good from the perspective that you are also giving the application your social media profile, and it will get too much information from there as well. So for the business will be forced to comply with the rules of Facebook or Google, and if they just find out that there's something they don't like about the business, they can shut the service, and then the business will lose the users who were using this service. So unfortunately, there is a trade-off between these processes, but most probably this method of accessing a website by using a code that you can generate on your phone and just scan it, it's much easier than a password. I don't know, what do you think? For me, I think it's much easier, but how much secure it will be, don't know. Like, there are some other websites also, they give you some additional information for authentication purposes, and some other things like those. So basically, this is multi-factor authentication. It was a quick overview about it, but it's something that's important to know about it, and to at least get some exposure to it and be aware of what's going in the industry of multi-factor authentication. It's already happening, and many companies are moving towards it, and it's such a critical, important technology that we should all start using it, and in order to protect ourselves and make things more secure. But what's the drawback of this? Yes, it's true that you increase your security, but you increase the burden on the user level. I mean, when you increase the security, then I mean it becomes difficult for the users. It becomes more annoying for the users to access the service. And honestly, there is no such solution that can break the trade-off between security and ease, make it easy for the users to access. So I think the QR code might make it easy and secure at the same time, but I'm not sure. Still, it's under investigation. Maybe companies are trying with it. They are making some trials, and they will see how this service will function and how it goes. And until you put it in the market and see whether it's hackable, not hackable, easy for the users, or users will be happy to use it. Otherwise, you cannot judge about the success of any new technology that's emerging on the market. So basically, these are the things we wanted to share with you about multi-factor authentications. So we can now take questions if there are any questions about the multi-factor authentications. Any questions about the multi-factor authentication topic? So looks like there are no questions. If there are no questions, we can stop the first part here and continue after 10 minutes from this time so that we can talk about the other topic. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this topic called multi-factor authentication, and you understood the importance of it and how it's being used. And if you develop an application or service, to consider this and take it into account so that you make your website or your app secure. So thank you. Take care and see you in the next part.